So welcome everyone to another episode of the Nudgecast, where we talk about all things financial wellbeing. So my name is Grace Massey. I'm the marketing director at Nudge. I've recently led our global research into financial wellbeing, where we've looked at the habits, behaviours and drivers of over 11,000 people worldwide to uncover trends in financial exclusion and education in different demographics. So this podcast is where we kind of talk about some of the different themes that came out in that report. And today I'm really excited to be joined by Alexa Grellet, who is co-founder of HR Data Hub. So massive warm welcome, Alexa.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be on the Nudgecast.
Brilliant. Yeah, I know we're talking about a topic today that is really close to your heart. So what we wanted to speak about is ultimately diversity and inclusion in the workplace and the role that data can play to help HR with that huge topic. So yeah, the perfect person to be talking on the Nudgecast today on this topic. So before we get started, it'd be great to hear a bit about your background and also HR Data Hub.
Sure. So I'm the co-founder of HR Data Hub. And I've worked my entire career in tech and in SaaS businesses, and most recently in startups, ranging from everything from super techy application performance world to the user experience design and everything across. And now as co-founder of HR Data Hub, I help our company essentially expand data awareness and access to data in the world of HR. The company has been going for about 3 years. So classic startup journey, came from, sort of like a background of a brilliant idea. And now we're like scaling up pretty quickly. It's really exciting. And essentially what we do is we have an intelligence platform that HR professionals use to get easy access to the data that they need to do their job. And when we say that, we mean data from across the world of HR. So what's going on around them, exactly as you would have a marketing intelligence platform to understand, is my website being visited more than other people? Well, we have the same thing about, am I hiring people at a higher pace than my competitors? Am I paying them more competitively? Is my organizations more diverse? In what ways? All these kinds of like super rich insights that HR professionals need when they want to be agile about adapting their workplace to the ever-evolving world of work. We are the intelligence platform to do that.
Brilliant. It's so exciting. And I think, based on our conversations so far, I really love what you guys are doing. And I think there's loads of alignment there actually with Nudge and how we also use data to drive behaviors, new thinking, insights for HR that they can't see in other places. So yeah, I'm really excited to be kind of following what you guys have been doing over the past few years. So when it comes to kind of diversity and inclusion, I mean, obviously this is a huge topic, which we'd never be able to cover all aspects in the time that we've got today. But when it comes to D&I, like in the workplace, what do you think, through working with HR professionals as you have been over the years, what the top challenges are that you think that they face?
Yeah, indeed, that's like a very, very broad.
Yes.
I think if I were to synthesize, months and months and months and months worth of conversations with D&I leaders, HR leaders across the board, I would say probably two things. One is like aligning action with intent. And secondly is transparency. So when I mean aligning action with intent, I think that there are lots of organizations that are still trying to find their way between how do we do as much as we say we want to do, and how do we really make realistic what we say we want to achieve. And I think that finding that balance and the perception around, am I doing enough, is what I'm trying to implement realistic and ambitious enough that it gives confidence to my employees and prospective employees and just the job market that I care as much as I do. And I think that that's a really challenging thing to do. And secondly, transparency is really helpful in that, because it's not just being open and transparent about the current state of what you're doing, but it's just yourself having the visibility into what is even happening. I don't know. And most of the time we know that privileged people are in positions of power, and they will not have lived these experiences. They will not come naturally to them to understand what it feels like to work here as, a person from a specific demographic. that is not, white, middle class and male probably. So I think that having that transparency to try to really get to grips with what are people experiencing, what are the patterns in hiring and people management within my organization, and how do I use this information to align my actions to my intent. That's what I would say is probably what I see across the board.
Yeah, completely. I mean, like you mentioned, it is such a huge topic. And I think, one of the things that we looked at in our recent report was those kind of external factors that surround the workplace and then how they play out within. So, we were looking specifically just at the financial ecosystem. And, that recognition that actually many respondents were saying that they feel excluded from the financial ecosystem. So, for example, 71% of mixed race respondents and 78% of South Asians have experienced that exclusion, as opposed to 37% of white people that had responded. Right. And I think, those cycles of exclusion, starting at home with 74% who depend on their family for financial education, 16% are looking at social media, which is a terrifying thought for information on finances. And what we really see is actually those external factors. Perhaps if employers were more aware of those, as you say, then actually it can inform them and how they can influence like the workplace itself. Because without that knowledge of the exclusion going on in the wider world, how are you going to kind of influence the sphere that you have already? So, I mean, obviously you guys are, playing a huge part in giving that data and giving that insight. Could you just talk a little bit around the kind of data and knowledge that you're able to give to help move people to a solution?
Sure. I think, one of the biggest challenges is how do you get access to reliable data and meaningful data? That's everybody that I talk to has this problem, because people might be super well aware if they've done a lot of work on their data infrastructure, on their HR processes and practices about, well, this is what we do. So I know a lot about me, but actually I don't know a lot about what's going on outside of my own walls, and what are other organizations doing, what is best practice in the market, what are some offerings that are actually getting sort of like people are really latching on because they're really good, what are some of the trends, and that's really the space where HR Data Hub plays. So we gather information from hundreds of organizations, so all the information that they would have about themselves internally, we take that information and we aggregate, anonymize all of this and put it onto a platform that people can then go and chart through and really sort of like dig through the different things that they want to look at across the entire employee lifecycle. And I think at the end of the day, it's about making sure that all the data that you have access to, if you are trying to be data-led and taking decisions, if you are trying to get some insights rather than saying, oh, gut feel, I think this might be the best thing to do, or I saw an ad on LinkedIn about that, I think it sounds great. Like, okay, but like, what is standard? Like, what is good practice? What are some of the top performers and most inclusive companies are doing? And what perspectives are they using in their organization that you can get inspired from? So we take all the data that organizations would have about themselves, but we take that about so many other organizations and put it all in one place. And I think that that's what makes it sort of meaningful, is because it's metrics that people know. They just know them only about themselves. Well, how about I tell you how that compares to everybody else? And then you can get that perspective, so that you know that if you're spending time setting up, new employee benefits or an employee or leadership training program, that that's actually quite a standard in your industry. And therefore, that's something you should totally look at. Or it's something that since COVID-19, people have been heavily invested in. As an employer, do you want to be left behind? Yeah. Those are the kinds of questions that you can answer when you have this sort of aggregated intelligence. And when we talk about what data is and how you want to use data to improve diversity and inclusion, definitely everybody's trying to figure it out. So definitely getting inspired from some of the best practices out there and some of the developing norms and standards is really crucial, so that you don't spend a lot of time and energy going into a completely different direction.
Yeah, completely. And I think, as I was saying before, it's getting that data and insight from different places, isn't it? Because you guys are, enabling people to understand from their network what best practice is. We look very much at, employees and what they need, like their financial needs, their behaviors. I think one thing that we've noticed as well is that many employers don't have an entire picture on how many people their individuals are supporting. So for example, 75% are supporting others on a salary, yet only 35% of employers are even aware of that. So I think kind of plugging that gap, you know, how can you support an individual's well-being if you don't have that full picture? So I think, you know, organizations such as yourself that are giving people that benchmark of others, but also insights into, you know, individuals and what's going on for them is so important. And I guess, you know, you touched upon it earlier, but I think one of, you know, my observation is one of the big challenge then is taking that insight and then driving action. So what, I mean, for you guys, you know, what have you seen the best companies are doing in that space, like taking that insight and then kind of moving forward?
Right. So I think a lot of organizations, I think that are performing really well, that are advancing, I guess, faster than I would say the average organizations that have spent a lot of time investing in their internal culture. And I know that as someone that leads a data company, I should probably tell you it's all about the data. Like, yeah, but actually you won't get any data about anyone that works for you if they don't trust you. If they feel that you're going to use this information against them in one way or another, or it's going to roadblock them or whatever, they're never going to share that about them. And you can only rely on what people share about themselves to know what their full self look like. And like you were hinting at, like the holistic picture of who is that person, what is their potential, what is their life experience, what is their generation impact of the generations that they come from, and how can we get the best out of them and they can become their best selves. So that, I would say, number one, organization that start there and have a really concrete plan for that and act on that a lot is awesome. And then from there, the more data you gather about people, and the more you keep reinforcing that you're using this data in a way that's meaningful, that's, you know, just really for the well-being of the organization, and that you prove that, you know, that you don't just take data and you never mention it to anybody ever again. That's, you know, probably like a red flag for employees. We you know, people see that all the time, where you asked me to be vulnerable with you and then I didn't see anything after that. Yeah, so absolutely. I think like really focusing on these, like reinforcing that sort of like pattern of trust with your employees, and then actually leveraging data in a way that's meaningful, in a way that's concrete, that's like action driven, and use that to sort of like make meaningful change and actively communicate on this. I think that's really good. Obviously, through the HR Data Hub platform, because we aggregate information and best practices and performance from hundreds of companies, automatically we're able to tell people, well, these are the 10 companies that are overperforming compared to you in your sector, and this is what they have in place, and you don't have half of those, so you should maybe consider those things like that. But you don't necessarily need a fancy platform for it. You can just you know, even if you try to do it manually, the whole thing is don't break that trust pattern with your employees, because if you break that, it's very hard to gain it back again and to make progress on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, when it comes to well-being, trust is so important, right? Because it's so personal to the individual. And, you know, especially obviously for us looking at finances in particular, disclosing information about dependents, you know, outside of, you know, the usual perhaps children, is very, very personal information. So completely see that. I guess it would be great to hear kind of your views on, I know you guys look at, you know, HR holistically, so financial wellbeing is just such a small part of all the data that you gather and what you talk to HR about, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on, you know, financial wellbeing and that connection with diversity and inclusion.
Absolutely. And I actually would argue that it's not necessarily a small part of that, because, and I'm sure you have lots of fancy numbers of research behind this, but the thing that stresses people out more is, are they going to be able to live with dignity with the salary that they earn, and with the choices that they make with that salary? And the better they're informed, and the more confident they feel that they're making good choices with that, and they can support the life that they want to lead and the people that they love, the better. So I would actually say that's probably one of the, you know, on borderline a human right, like that, to feel
perhaps safe. I didn't give it enough credit there.
Yeah, absolutely, like to feel safe. And so I think when it comes to diversity and inclusion, it's really important for everyone and all of us playing in that field, and especially all of us that are privileged, like myself, like you, like a lot of other people, around the generational impact of financial instability and the fact that lots of groups that have been marginalized and undermined and discriminated in the workplace historically are the ones that have been more financially stretched and stressed over time. And so there is a generational impact that's really important, and we can't just consider, okay, clean slate, new workforce, this is 2021. Well, actually, no. We all know that the behaviors, especially financial behaviors, sort of learned over time, and often they're learned from these like nucleus sort of like family environments. And breaking from those cycles is beyond how much you pay people and what their compensation package is. So I think that actually making a change and supporting organizations that have historically been discriminated against in the workplace is really tightly linked to what additional support can you bring to help them bridge that knowledge gap that may or may not exist. But we can't assume that it's not there, because we know that historically it has been a group that hasn't been, privy to necessarily having a financial advisor as a standard for everybody around them, like not necessarily, right? So I think that there's definitely something telling us that that is an action that organizations can take to show their workforce that they care about them being financially successful in their life, in and outside of work, and that's something that they can do. And I think that is definitely, we have a list of actions that organizations can take to improve their diversity and inclusion performance. And we all know that more and more, being a competitive employer actually comes down to what kind of benefits are you providing. It's no longer just salary, it's actually the full package of all of the things that employees can have access to. And we see that a lot, especially in certain markets where it's becoming more and more competitive to hire staff. The more you can show through benefits, through actions, that these are things that we put in place to make sure that you feel good here and that your life is impacted positively outside of you thriving in this job, is bringing people confidence. And especially when we talk about inclusion and we talk about tenure in roles and longevity in organizations, there is a link there. So yeah, I'm I think there's definitely a case to say maybe it's not a fundamental human right, probably like shelter, water, nutrition are probably up there, but it's something that is definitely on the radar of more and more organization. And actually we ran a survey earlier this year for HR leaders around what are some of the things that you're looking to implement in 2021 coming out of COVID. And one of the top things that people were sort of investing in when it came to financial well-being are, financial well-being platforms, services, not just inside the organization, sort of like reviewing their pays and all of that. Is literally, how can we empower our employees to feel good about the decisions that they're making and in their financial life.
Absolutely. And I think, and it's great to see that there has been such a huge shift recently in that way. I mean, Nudge was founded in 2013. It was one of the first financial wellbeing benefits. And, since then, it's great to see the rise in popularity of it in the workplace. And actually in our research, it did show as well that those on an employee level, those that were supported specifically with actually financial education, I think it goes to your point around empowering. It's like, actually, if people are empowered with those skills and knowledge to make the most of their finances, it doesn't matter how much you earn, it's a very accessible benefit. And we did see that actually those people that were supported with financial education were kind of 4 times more likely to feel kind of well, I guess, and happy in their situation. So yeah, I don't think we can underestimate, the power of that and the power of kind of empowering individuals, for sure.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
And you recently launched your kind of first, like, I guess, diversity and inclusion product. I mean, is there anything very exciting? I saw the launch last week. Yeah, any kind of initial reactions that you wanted to share?
Sure. We launched our Diversity and Inclusion Index, which is the world's first objective data-led index. So it's not manipulable in any way by narrative. You can't just like earn your way to like a good grade. It's all about how well are you performing when it comes to, you know, individual characteristics and diversity and inclusion, and in a way that's sort of like concrete and factual. And it's been such a delight seeing, you know, the reaction of our community, the HR community, and saying, okay, this makes everything so clear, because it's not about, okay, well, I implemented this, I implemented that. No, concretely, where are people hired? How long do they stay in their roles? Are you diverse across the organization, across talent areas? Do you pay people that are in the same level similar salaries? There's a really big discrepancy between, you know, members of the LGBTQ, you know, group and the other ones, for example. So I think we've been really excited to see many more people want to have that conversation about a holistic approach to diversity and inclusion through objective data. And you know, it just makes me feel good, because we know that, you know, after what happened in 2021 and you know, the different social movements and the murder of George Floyd, we've seen so many organizations come up and say, we support, you know, members of Black Lives Matter, we support this, we support that, we want to sign up to this charter. And honestly, amazing. The more you want to do, the better. Awesome. Is the life of people that are employed in your organization better? Have you changed your practices? And that's reflected in how people are employed concretely and remunerated in your organization. And that's a much more complicated conversation to have. And the fact that more and more organizations want to step into that light and that clarity, not to sound cultish about it, but it's like, okay, statements are awesome. So let's talk about transparency, and let's talk about data, and let's talk about facts. And the more organizations want to step into that world, that is really what leads to concrete action and to change. So super delighted, and really hope to be able to have this chat again in a year's time and see, oh, this is, you know, how far we've come, and how many organizations are actually taking action based on data, and making meaningful change for everybody that works for them.
Completely. I think, yeah, I mean, I think exactly as you say, the amount of companies that perhaps did a lot of performative, you know, comments and things when stuff was happening socially. And I think it's brilliant that you guys are really driving that real change and actionable change. And I think, yeah, this time next year, I absolutely would love to have you on again to review everything you've seen and how you've shifted behaviors. No, because I genuinely believe you're giving organizations access to information that's really going to help. So I have no doubt we'll have a lot to unpack in a year's time.
Let's hope so, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Alexa, and I'm sure we will watch in awe as you guys continue.
Thanks, it's been a pleasure, Grace.
Thank you so much. Stop the recording.